came from, right? That's the industrial revolution. And then there was a revolution with respect to the computers, right? So when we were getting into the computer age, people also had issues. Again, we came over that. And new sets of jobs are created on the computer context. Then came the internet. Again, the same stuff. Now, we are witnessing this AI, right? So again, AI, they say that, hey, this is going to completely take away a lot of jobs. That was the biggest concern. As well as it would add more jobs or create more opportunities. What I see is when we are very lucky to see these multiple transitions in our lifetime. At least for me, through the computer to the internet to what we see today, right? Having said this, the AI is going to completely revolutionize the way how things are going to do. The way how computers came, how the internet made a big change. AI is going to do that. And AI is going to stay here. It is going to be the future. Unless we all get into the AI, I don't think we could, you will be more illiterate. And while every other country is doing their set of stuff on the AI, India has a wonderful opportunity because we have so much of talent within India, as well as, you know what, we have so much of support from the government, which is, I wouldn't say that it was not there earlier, but then it was now a lot more reinforcement that's happening now, right? So it's a great time where we have a lot of youth, a lot of young people, a lot of talent, and then there is a support from the government, and we are all motivated, right? So this large language model, what you are seeing is only the tip of the iceberg. There's a lot more to come for when we talk about the virtual reality, the augmented reality, mixing of these, right? So many more, yes. And finally, now what we see as an AGI, which is like a general intelligence, will become the super intelligence eventually. And in particular, I think the future is for AI and for India, right? And we'll all be very, very supportive. We'll be very fortunate to see that kind of things coming from.
Excellent answer, sir. I think it balanced the kind of the challenge that we have, and it also gives assurance in terms of how we sailed through earlier challenges, yet was able to make a powerful impact on the society. Basically your narrative is very assuring. Thank you for that. First Vikramarkudu pass ayyadu. Thanks and mere negara nenu odipayanu. Anyway, I will not leave this. Nenu Batharanlu kabatti let me ask the second question now. In fact, you set a platform for me to ask a question to మీకే కాదు, నేను కూడా ఆయనకు అన్సెట్ స్టూడెంట్ని. నన్ను మందలించడానికి తిట్టడానికి కూడా నేను సంశయించాను ఆయన ప్రతాప్ రెడ్డి గారు. మేమిద్దరం గత 10 ఏళ్ళుగా సన్నిహితులము. సార్, ఇక్కడ ఐ థింక్ యూ డోంట్ హ్యావ్ ఎ మచ్ బెటర్ ప్లాట్ఫామ్ లైక్ పల్లా రాజేశ్వర రెడ్డి గారు ఇక్కడ ఉన్నారు, ప్రైవేట్ యూనివర్సిటీ సెక్టర్, IIIT మన రాజన్ గారు స్టేజ్ మీదే ఉన్నారు, డాక్టర్ యు బాలాజీ గారు నా గురువు గారు ఆయన కూడా రూమ్లో ఉన్నారు. పక్కనే కూర్చుని ఇండస్ట్రీ ఏమో మీకు ఛాలెంజ్ విసురుతుంది, ఏ చాలా బాగుంది, దెర్ ఈస్ ఎ హ్యూజ్ a wave going on. In terms of our educational ecosystem that we have in India or in Telangana or the combined states, do you think that we are preparing well for a better tomorrow for AI? Of course, Swecha is doing something like this. I want to see your student generation, which is coming out of this educational ecosystem, would be prepared for this challenge, in your opinion?
I can say that historically it happens like that. Like in the sense, the necessities will come from the requirement of the whole society, and in the process, the skilled manpower will evolve. Like for example, today around 11 lakh engineers are coming out as graduates across India, and out of that, more than 80,000 graduates are coming only in Telangana. So that is the kind of numbers that we are going to generate as graduates. Now, when it comes to the present day mechanism of access to information, like for example, if you say AI algorithms or content on the AI itself. I can say that information ecosystem, there's a huge amount of information ecosystem that is available in different ways and means on the internet itself. Like for example, if you wanted to know, apply a particular algorithm, and that algorithm source code will be available, so under open source. So that kind of an ecosystem, information ecosystem is available. But the biggest challenge is how do we translate that into knowledge ecosystem. See, there's a difference between how the information exists and how you translate that into knowledge. I'll give you an example of, as Swecha president, I'll give one simple example. Maybe around 10 years back, we foresaw there will be a kind of a huge requirement on content management development engineers, or rather manpower. So we trained around 60,000 to 1 lakh students on Drupal. Now you'll be able to find there's a huge amount of manpower that exists in Telangana who can actually work in the front end and back end, especially on Drupal. So such kind of initiatives are important to create the knowledge ecosystems. That's very important. I think it is necessary for us to prepare for that. That's the first point. Second thing, I have another aspect also. Like when you actually try to learn from the available information, the biggest challenge is the, we call it as interpretive labor. Like in the sense, the author of the content developer will create in such a way that some amount of knowledge is left over and the reader will try to learn it. And some people will create content in such a way that it's easy to learn, understand. So actually you have different layers of students and people across the state. So what we need is, how do we actually create content for different layers of students in the downstream, so that everyone will try to learn something a little more. Like every student should climb one step ahead. So these are the two biggest challenges. I think the experiences of Swecha will definitely help us a lot in building the manpower. The last point which I'd like to mention is, when you actually try to create such kind of manpower, skilled manpower, it is necessary to target use cases. So in AI, everybody is talking about it, but use cases are much more important. I think this is where as Swecha we have an edge, but at the same time, we also think that large number of organizations and streams should join hands to actually build certain use cases, maybe in medicine, or maybe in education, or maybe any other aspect which is useful to a larger cross-section of people. Are there two commons, I can say that. These are the challenges.
So phenomenal, sir. Actually, your words are very assuring, and not only in terms of what we are having right now, which we were not having a decade back, point one. Point two, the emphasis in terms of the domain pitch, which industries can bring in, especially to the ecosystem in terms of use cases. It could be pharma licenses, telecommunications, banking and financials. Phenomenal answer, and with all your permission, I'm passing the second Vikramarkudu also with a great rating. Thank you so much for that answer, sir. And madam, I am not going to come to you because ఏమవుతుందంటే అందరూ ఏమో చెప్తారండి, లాస్ట్ గవర్నమెంట్ దగ్గరికి వస్తాయి, అందుకు లాస్ట్ మీ దగ్గరికి వస్తా. ఇప్పుడు ఆల్రెడీ 2 points ఉన్నాయి. So I will make your question very complex actually. I will take the liberty of asking Professor Rajan. In fact, he was kind enough to visit even Tech Mahindra campus recently. In fact, he shared some of his thoughts into our, kind of technical engineers also. Rajan sir, my question is twofold actually. Sir has brought up an interesting point. You have the biggest advantage of being IIIT Hyderabad to get the best in the breed, right? You get nice, very, if I can say IQ levels, you get very good students, point one. Second, he talked about certain differentiated curriculum, differentiated learning pedagogies or whatever for differentiated students. That's the first part of the question. Second part, I would like to represent Tech Mahindra here. Some of the folks who are in the companies must have spent 10 years. You have seen guys when you visited our campus. Basically to get ready for the first thing that Mr. Kiran Kumar was talking about in terms of opportunities available. And Professor Pratap Reddy's point is that basically the ecosystem is getting ready, but somebody who is not so intelligent, point one, somebody who might have missed the bus, somebody who spent 10 years of service working somewhere, do you think they will miss bus, or what do you think from your perspective to make them good? You can add your research advantage that you bring to the table also. And by the way, how many of you know, I don't know, this is one of the premier institutions in Hyderabad which has got a powerful high computing machine. Apart from Tech Mahindra, we have one, and it's the proudest institution in Hyderabad, and I'm sure most of you know. Sir, up to you.
Thank you, Nirmal. So, couple of things before I think I would come back and answer your pointed questions in some sense, right? Two things that comes to my mind as a continuation of what Pratap Garu mentioned just now, right? So one of the things that is talked about is in terms of knowledge. We are not talking about in terms of utility, but we are talking about in terms of knowledge systems, right? So I'll maybe step back a bit and then come back to this knowledge system in a minute. So how many of you, for example, many of the youngsters possibly are born here seeing maps or finding location on a map, right? But how many of you who are pre-2000 born, right, would have actually talked about maps? Very few, possibly. How many of you have actually reached out to a map apart from maybe in your school geography, right? I come from a background where I teach geospatial locational intelligence and stuff. So I'll use that analogy to come back to this AI analogy and stuff. So many of you started looking at a map when you started seeing it on the web, right? That was your first introduction to a map. But interestingly, that satellite imagery was available for more than 30-40 years before that. Since 60s and 50s, these maps were there. But these maps were not in the common man's hand, right? And in an area like ours, we used to say, you need really skilled manpower, people who understand these, people who will be able to interpret this, who will actually identify what is useful there and where it can be used in science or in various other applications and stuff like that, right? But the minute that map was made available to a lot of people started looking at very different things, very simple things for people to do. First thing, where is my house, right? Now, the first thing that possibly many of you did when ChatGPT came is also ask very simple questions or write a paragraph about somebody whom I know. Why? Because you're using that to collect some kind of information to assess whether the tool works or not, right? So interestingly, humans learn not in a very, very structured way. We are a very unstructured learning species in some sense. We learn things in bits and pieces, okay, and then we put them all together in some context. So we use various kind of contextual learning that we do, right? So when you look at a knowledge system, essentially that's the derived information out of that. So when you look at different levels of learning, that is because their context in which this learning happens is very, very different. And unfortunately, the education system that in the Indian model, we call it the Macular education model, that typically is a very factory-driven model. Read this syllabus, write this exam, you got this marks, then you are supposed to know the subject. Otherwise, you don't. Right? This is not true. Okay? Interesting, I had a nice research student, and I'll use that as an example. A research student who possibly got one of the lowest grades in that subject. But if you ask him anything in that subject, he would answer it. So I was one day surprised and I asked him, what did you do? He said, sir, the question paper was very interesting in the end semester exam. And then after that, I went and read the whole book in 3 days. So now he knows the subject, but he may not have the grade or the mark. Right? So the real world essentially has these kinds of various kinds of learners. And learners learn because they are inquisitive about that part of the knowledge. And that knowledge is what we are looking for. Right? So how do we reach out and make that knowledge available is what we should look for. Right? So this effort, for example, I've been involved with Swecha for very long, and when this effort was being talked about a couple of months ago, one of the things that struck me also was this will be a very nice way of showing the utility of a tool like AI. Right? Ultimately, it is about how people make or convert that into something that is useful to them. Convert that into something that is meaningful to them. Right? If it is not meaningful, however fancy that stuff is, however expensive that stuff is, or however difficult to get that stuff is, people are not happy with it. They'll see it once and then forget it. Right? Now, if you want to bring something in our life, we have to make it easy for us to use and adapt. And this example of using the stories as one of the easiest way of reaching out and making sense of what AI can do right, is very, very easy for every common man to understand. This doesn't need very high level thinking. If I'm doing AI for finance and I'll say, oh, I'll predict how the behavior of the share market will be and stuff, it's for a very, very small niche market and a niche user who might say, well, I'm driven, AI driven shares pricing is what I'm doing. But that's not what common man will understand. Because 99.9% possibly is not in that market, is not doing that kind of a trade, right? But on the other hand, stories happens to be very nice way to connect that. And this is, I think, a very wonderful initiative of Swecha to initiate or even bring this awareness to a lot of people that it can be used in your very close or in a thing that you can very nicely identify yourself with. Something that I think we were discussing just before coming here, and somebody was saying we used to fight to get this monthly newsletter, right? First, to be able to read it first, right? Now it is the same way if you start looking at the storytelling from AI or using AI towards doing that, it completely changed the model set. Now, there was a second question that you were asking about people who are having a certain skill set or who are supposedly having a better IQ versus not. In my view, I don't think IQ really matters in some sense if you don't know for what you are applying this IQ. Right? So it's very important that the purpose in our life, the purpose of what we are doing, the purpose of our learning, the purpose of utilization of these tools and techniques has to be very clear in our minds. And even though it is clear at our level, unfortunately many of us are driven by our peer group. Oh, everybody is saying this is good, so let's do that. So I think that it's a time when we are rediscovering, in some sense, that customization or individualization of a lot of this knowledge base is also equally important, because each one of us is unique and each one of us has unique capabilities. The question is, how do we help build or flower that unique capability of an individual, and can we do that in a country like ours